Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories about abandoned farmhouses in Appalachia. If you've ever wondered what secrets the Appalachian backroads are hiding, stay tuned to find out. But before we begin, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now let's start. The house sat in a hollow off Morrow Ridge Road, way out in eastern Kentucky where the trees feel like they're leaning in to listen. Its roof had sagged low, half caving under years of neglect. Kudzu had grown over one side until you could almost see the house breathing beneath it. I've heard it belonged to a great uncle, or maybe someone further back in the family tree. Nobody in our bunch could agree. When my cousin Maddie suggested wandering out to see it, I figured she just wanted an excuse for a drive with the radio off. She's always had this thing for abandoned places. Dust, silence, secrets. I went along mostly because my sense of adventure was sleeping, and she had the keys. We parked where the gravel ended and the undergrowth began to take back the road. The car rattled as the forest swallowed the sound. The path narrowed and the air stiffened. There was this pressure, like the woods were leaning closer to eavesdrop on us. The crunch of leaves underfoot grew louder as the gravel disappeared. The house appeared almost without warning, framed by trees. It was bigger than I'd pictured, 3 stories tall, with a chimney half tilted, as if tired of pointing at the sky. The porch sagged in the middle, like it had quit supporting life. I shouldered open the door and got met by musty, dusty air. It smelled like sun-warmed books left inside a closed box for years. The floor groaned like it was waking up, creaking under my boots with almost comic protest. I paused and let the sound fill me in. My hands followed the air, reading the room. Blind since I was little, I learned to listen hard. I feel for textures. I know a place by how echoes bounce off walls. This place felt schizophrenic. Wide spaces that seemed cramped, tight corners that echoed like caverns. It made no sense. Maddie called something about a rattling window and started up the stairs. I stayed behind, one hand trailing over faded wallpaper that had once been bright florals, now chipping in flakes. Baseboards bumped into my fingertips, wood worn thin by time. Old plates were stacked dusty on a counter. A threadbare coat hung over a chair as if left mid-use. A cot slumped against a wall. Whoever lived here left in the middle and never came back. That kind of quiet makes your skin crawl. You don't need words. The leftover echo of absence says enough. At the end of the hall, I found a door unlike the others. Metal, flush with the wall. Painted the same bland off-white so it blended in unless you were paying attention. I reached for the knob. It didn't move. Locked. I whispered, "Maddie?" Like I was waking someone from a bad dream. Her footsteps came quick and uneven. "Yeah? There's this door here. Did you see it before?" She pressed her palm against it and chuckled nervously. "Nope, maybe it's the old root cellar?" We shrugged it off. Old houses have strange doors that lead nowhere. But then the smell drifted in. Damp, dusty, metallic. It started faint, like breathing under a pillow. By afternoon, it was sharp enough to wrinkle the nose. "Something probably rotted in there," I said quietly, hoping it was just old garbage. Maddie nodded. We decided to leave before the smell knocked us out. But just as we turned, I stopped. "Hold on," I said. She didn't look. There weren't this many doors before. The hair at the back of my neck stood up. I counted. There had been 3 rooms on the left wall. Now there were 4. We stared. Then we opened the new one. The knob turned, like it had been waiting. The darkness behind it felt thick, like dipping your hand into cold water and not trusting your fingers to know it. I stepped in. The floor tilted downward. "This must lead to the cellar," I whispered. But the locked door, it was gone. Maddie was still in the hallway. No one answered. I turned to see if she was coming. When I looked back, the door frame wasn't there. No door, just wall. My hand reached slowly, searching. Smooth plaster, no grooves, no wood, no handle. It felt like touching the surface of a river frozen in time. I kept walking, the slope deepened. My boots slipped on slick planks that gave way underfoot. The air grew heavy, almost wet in my lungs. I reached out, but there were no walls. Nothing but emptiness, as if the building itself had vanished. Then 3 knocks, sharp, hollow. They echoed below me. I jerked. My heart was a drum. I tried stepping back, but gravity pulled harder. I tumbled forward into something solid. A door, metal again. The smell of earth, rust, and old digging filled the air. This knob turned too, easier than I expected. I pressed through. The light was dim, but enough to outline shapes. Hooks spaced along the walls, faintly gleaming, chains hanging in perfect loops. A splintered table soaked in something I didn't want to name. Ropes curled from an overhead beam, clean but measuring nothing innocent. Tools scattered across the table blades, instruments that whispered control. The place reeked of fear, stale sweat, stale breath. The air itself held panic, not mine, but dozens of others. Then I heard breathing, right behind me. Slow, wet, alive. I didn't turn, I ran. Arms out, I searched for walls. I pushed off something solid. Then another wall I recognized, tongue-splintered wood under my palms. It was the hallway. I stumbled through a doorframe and pitched into open air. I heard Maddie. Maddie! My voice cracked, my throat burning. She answered, faint but sure. On the porch! I pushed out through the front door. There she was, thin and pale, though the heat still pressed around us. Her eyes wide, her face tight with fear. She asked quietly, "Where were you?" I tried to answer, but my voice shook. She nodded once. "I was upstairs looking. You never came down." Then she pointed at the window above the porch. "I saw you, just your silhouette, floating by." I didn't argue. I opened her car door and collapsed inside. Next day, same road, same turns. The gravel cut in where we parked, all gone. Forest, where the clearing should be. No road, no house. Like it never existed except for memory. I don't know what happened in that basement, if it was real or some trick the house played. But there was something there, something watching, something not empty. Now I latch every window before I think about opening it, even when July heat traps me inside. I avoid abandoned places, derelict buildings, overgrown roads, whispers of old houses, and I refuse to drive that way again. I had drifted for what felt like an eternity. Nearly 7 months without steady work. My last job was hanging sheetrock in a hospital expansion. Then the developer pulled funding. That was the end of that. After that came a scatter of odd jobs in forgettable towns. Places where the ratio of pawn shops to people felt way out of balance. I wasn't chasing anything. I wasn't hiding from anyone. Just stuck in that slow slide you don't notice until you're too deep. Trace called me on a Thursday, voice low and a little nervous. "I've got a place," he said, sort of. He told me about a half-dead farmhouse beyond a place called Hinton Ridge, back near the foothills. "It isn't mine," he cautioned. "But I've got the keys. No one's there. Totally off the grid. Real quiet. Needs work. But you'll have your space." He made it sound half mysterious, half promising. I went because I had nowhere else to go. Getting there was its own kind of climb. No cell signal for miles. 5, maybe 6. The mailbox by the road was rusted and bent, leaning like it couldn't hold the weight of its own mail slot. The gate was overgrown and sagging. The gravel road turned to dirt, then to something that felt like a hollow in the earth. The silence around it was strange, not peaceful, more like the world fell asleep by accident, and no one came to wake it up. The house was one of those backstories turned real. 2 stories, but off-kilter, tilted just enough to make you queasy standing next to it. The wood was dull gray, almost vanishing into gravel. The roof sagged at one edge. Most windows were blown out or gone completely. The porch stairs were spongy and uneven. I remember testing one like a coward and feeling it give under my weight. The door didn't fit its frame. It only slid shut when it felt like it. Still, when I climbed out of my truck, that place felt better than the cab where I had been sleeping. I brought my duffel, a tarp, my toolbox, a few cans of food, and Gull, my black shepherd mix. She had been with me since I found her 6 years earlier, stranded at a gas station. She wasn't one for strangers. She was cautious like me. But she stuck around. She watched my back when I couldn't duck. Trust matters when everything else slips away. Night 1, I lit a fire in the old brick fireplace, coaxing warmth from cold stone. No electricity, no plumbing, no real heat. But the roof held. The floor didn't cave. I laid my sleeping bag against the inner wall of what used to be the living room. Gull wandered, then plopped at the foot of the stairs. Her eyes never left the landing. I stayed on my side of the room, with nothing but firelight and shadows between us, and I listened. Houses like that breathe in their own way. The wood popping, breeze threading through cracks, leaves slithering against the siding. But something else was alive in that silence. Sometimes it hissed, quiet, like someone breathing through a cracked vent. Not human sounding, just present. I blamed the wind. Told myself I was only hearing what I needed so I wouldn't feel alone. Morning light revealed decay made real. The kitchen looked like it had fought every good intention and lost. Cabinets swollen with mold. Countertops sagging, rippled like waves. The sink streaked red, veins of rust. Inside the oven, a wasp's nest, empty but fragile. A mouse's skeleton rested in a cereal bowl. I cursed under my breath but told myself, people clean worse than this every day. That wasn't what unsettled me. It was the way the rooms connected. The first floor had 3 doors, 2 led outside. The third was thin and sickly, the knob crusted with neglect. That one opened to the cellar. I closed it. I didn't touch it again. Upstairs, logic unraveled. 3 rooms. A corridor that stretched longer than the house's footprint should allow. Windows lined the hallway, but none looked outside. One showed siding. Another, wood panels as if another structure hovered outside. Except, it didn't. I stared until my eyes ached. By night 3, I stopped trying to rationalize. Old houses bend you with odd angles. People renovate and forget. Walls shift. Rooms get added. It made enough sense to let me sleep. But sleep came hard. Gull woke me in the dark, her growl low and unsteady. Not at me, not at some animal. She was fixed on the cellar door. The chair I had wedged against the knob was knocked over. The door cracked open like it sighed. I knew I had shut it. I had latched it. Still, there it was. I grabbed a hammer, shut it again, bolted it, and shoved the couch against it. Gull didn't relax until dawn. The next morning, I needed air. Behind the barn, the brush pressed close, but light shone through the slats. That's when I saw it, another house. It stood maybe 40 yards beyond the barn, half hidden by trees. The same shape, same roof slope, same 2 stories, but newer, cleaner. Its windows intact, its wood less weary. I blinked, trying to remember if I'd passed it. I hadn't. Then, I swear it lit up. A room upstairs glowed. It wasn't a mirage. Not then, not tired enough, not drunk enough. I stumbled back inside, locked everything, and slept sitting up with the hammer in my lap. By day 5, the air itself felt different. Heavier, upstairs colder, like an invisible wall cut across the landing. Doors I shut in the morning stood open by afternoon. Gull refused to step into the upper hallway. She blocked it, whining low, tail frozen. I packed what I could, tried the truck, silence, battery fine, tank full, no click, nothing. I sat there as dusk turned the place to gray ghosts. I told myself I'd walk out in daylight, just one more night, then I'd go. But the next night answered me. Footsteps shuffled across the kitchen floor. Slow, deliberate. They crossed the living room, climbed the stairs. Gull shuddered but didn't bark. She froze beside me. Upstairs, a door creaked open. The fire sputtered, coals fading. Then something dragged. Not light, heavy, slow. It pressed itself into the floorboards above me. I stayed still. Held my breath, waited. When dawn broke, I threw everything in my bag, yanked the door open and ran. The second house was closer now, directly across the sparse field. I didn't look at it, didn't care for its windows. I just ran until the road returned. The truck refused to start, so I left it. I walked. I walked until the trees broke, and I stumbled onto a ranger station. I told them I was squatting, got turned around, didn't know whose land it was. They didn't push. They gave me a ride to town. I bought a bus ticket. I left. Months later, curiosity clawed me awake. I looked the place up. The record said the house burned down in 1978. I was 22 when I took a job that sounded too weird to be true. But I was broke, so I wasn't picky. It was an online ad. Help clear out an inherited farmhouse. Keep anything of value. No background check. No questions. Just a cash offer and the promise of a weekend's work in the middle of nowhere. The house was buried deep in Clay County, Kentucky. I had to use a paper map for the last few miles because GPS gave up completely. The paved road turned to gravel, then to dirt, and finally into a path that felt more like a suggestion than a road. I ended up parking at the bottom of a muddy slope. My car, an aging Civic with no business off-roading, slid backward when I tried to push forward. From there, I hiked. It was mid-October, and the mud swallowed my boots with every step. My socks were soaked within minutes. I kept thinking the house couldn't possibly be farther, and then it always was. When I finally saw it, the place looked like it had been forgotten not just by people, but by gravity itself. The frame leaned forward, as if bowing for decades. The porch was warped, planks missing. The roof had holes big enough to see the sky. One entire wall was wrapped in ivy, the forest reclaiming it from the outside in. And yet, it wasn't a total ruin. No broken windows, no graffiti. No signs of squatters. It wasn't vandalized, just left. Inside, the air felt wrong immediately. Not just mold, though that was part of it. Something in the texture of the air, like dust, mixed with stillness. The house didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused. The front door resisted, but when I shoved my shoulder against it, it groaned open like an old man stretching. I stepped inside and instantly regretted wearing sneakers from college. The floor bowed under me, damp and untrustworthy. The kitchen looked trapped in another decade. Dishes in the sink, cracked but stacked. A single chair knocked over. Crumbs on the counter, untouched for years. The linoleum curled back, revealing dark wood. Everything was coated in dust except the stove knobs. They looked touched, barely, as if someone had twisted them once long ago. I started taking photos of things that might sell. Side tables, faded oil paintings, antique mirrors, a trunk of clothes that smelled like mildew and regret. Most of the house was a crawl through sagging floors and water-stained ceilings. There were strange details, 2 perfectly sealed jars of fruit in the pantry, lined neatly. Labels faded into nothing. Upstairs, the air grew heavier. Not metaphorically, literally. Thicker, harder to breathe, like stepping into a room that didn't want you there. One bedroom was wrecked, insulation hanging like dirty snow, raccoon prints scattered in dust. Another looked untouched, as though someone had stopped sleeping there only weeks ago, not decades. But what stood out was a door in the center of the hallway. Unmarked, no rot, jammed shut, and colder than the air around it. I touched the handle once, felt the chill through the metal, and decided to leave it alone for now. The oddity started small. Dust piles I swept, returned. Newspapers I carried outside appeared back inside, folded the same way. One night, while eating on the porch, I heard a crash upstairs. I ran up and found a glass jar shattered at the top of the staircase. I hadn't touched the pantry. The shards were clean. like it had just broken but without any sticky residue, just glass. I told myself it was an old house. Old houses do weird things. I made excuses until I couldn't. On the fourth night, I forced open the cold door upstairs. It led to a child's bedroom, a twin bed with exposed springs, a dresser with a missing drawer, and drawings. Hundreds of them. Crayon figures covered every wall, every corner, curling at the edges. Jagged red shapes, some faceless, some with too many faces. One drawing repeated over and over, layered sheets scrawled with the same word: stay, 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 stay. The air in that room was different, not just cold, silent, no creaks, no groans. The space itself seemed to breathe. That night, I couldn't go back inside. I sat in my car with the engine off until morning. The woods around me were dead quiet, the kind of quiet where even bugs don't stir. The next morning, muddy footprints waited at the bottom of the staircase. Bare feet, too small to be mine, fresh. They stopped at the first step, as if someone had simply appeared. The pantry was emptied, every jar gone. In their place, at the center of the shelf, sat a small wooden block, carved into the shape of a house. Unfinished, handmade. That should have been my end, but I stayed. Later that evening, I climbed the stairs. The child's door was cracked open. The same cold air seeped out. I flicked on my flashlight and scanned the floor. That's when I saw it. Under the bed was a perfect square cut into the floorboards. A hole, a foot wide, no nails, no splinters. Clean, as if it had always been there. I leaned closer and heard it, breathing, slow, measured, not mine. I backed out, closed the door, wedged a chair against the knob, and fled to the porch. That night, I returned with a crowbar and flashlight. I told myself I needed proof. But when I arrived, the front door was open. Inside, everything was reset. Dust untouched. Newspapers back on the table. The chair in the kitchen tipped over again. Upstairs, the jammed door stood wide open. The chair I'd used lay across the hall. I walked in, no turning back. I dropped to the floor and shined my light at the hole. Movement. A twitch, like a sleeping body. Then came the breath. I ran, didn't stop for my car or my bag. I sprinted through mud and trees until I hit the road and saw the glow of a gas station. I never went back. Never asked for payment. Never returned the owner's call. I blocked the number, deleted the emails. It was over. Months later, in a used bookstore in Lexington, I found a newspaper clipping tucked between pages of a cookbook. It told of a boy who vanished in the late 50s, 6 years old, lived on a farmhouse property in Clay County, disappeared overnight. No forced entry. Parents said he'd been carving something the night before, a wooden toy, his favorite. Search parties combed the woods. Nothing. The only thing found near an old well was a small wooden house, hand-carved, unfinished. There was a photo. Same size, same shape, same splintered edge. I stared at it for a long time. Then I burned the clipping in my sink. I was 34 when I started clearing out my cousin's old farmhouse, tucked deep in the hills of Appalachia. The place was in a little pocket of nowhere called Gray Hollow. The whole valley looked like it had been forgotten on purpose. Barely a blip on GPS. No signs, no neighbors, just woods pressing in like they were trying to reclaim it. The house sat crooked against a hill, boards warped and silvered from decades of rain. Its porch was half-eaten by vines thick enough to pull down gutters. It looked more like a warning than a home. My cousin Eric had inherited the place after our great-uncle passed. The plan was simple: clean it out, get rid of the rot, and maybe if we could make it look halfway decent, find a buyer crazy enough to take it on. I said yes, partly because my summer was wide open. I hadn't had a real schedule in months, but also, I kind of liked the idea of disappearing into silence for a while. I told myself it would be peaceful, like some weird detox from city life. But the minute we rolled up, I realized this wasn't going to be that kind of quiet. We got there around midday. The truck rolled through grass up to the wheel wells, tires crunching down a narrow dirt path that had once been a driveway. Eric hopped out first, lugging a crowbar from the back. The front door had been sealed with a rusted padlock so old it looked more decorative than secure. He wedged the crowbar in, gave it a hard snap, and the lock cracked like glass. That noise, it was sharp, clean, final. We stood there a second longer than necessary, like we were both waiting for something else to happen. Inside, the silence hit different. It wasn't the kind you get from disuse or decay. It was cleaner than that, controlled. It didn't smell like dust or rot either. It smelled deliberate, almost sterile, like everything had been aired out too perfectly, like someone had erased every trace of whoever used to live there. Eric went straight to the back, tearing apart shelves and bagging up collapsed furniture. I headed into the kitchen. That's when the weirdness started. Not dramatic, just enough to make my brain itch. Every drawer I opened was empty. Not a spoon, not a receipt, not even a dead battery, just clean wood. In a place untouched for 30 years, you expect mess, mice nests, junk, something. I opened 6 drawers, 6 times, nothing. It felt staged. Then the chair caught my attention. A wooden chair was pushed slightly away from the table, maybe an inch, maybe less. I nudged it back with my foot and kept working. 10 minutes later, it had moved again. Same distance. I adjusted it, said nothing. Next time I looked, it had shifted again. Eric came in holding a desiccated opossum corpse by the tail, dry and crumbling like it had been there longer than the house itself. I tried to joke, said, "You found the previous owner." He laughed, but there was a pause before it, like he had to convince himself it was funny. Later, I walked past the hallway mirror and caught my reflection. Sort of. The hallway looked fine, but my image felt delayed. My eyes flickered in the glass, like they were turning before my head moved. Just a split second, but enough to stop me cold. I didn't look again after that. We slept in the truck that night. Eric said the living room floor wasn't too bad, soft boards, old blanket. I shook my head. I couldn't explain it, but something about closing my eyes inside that house felt like handing over permission, like saying yes to something that hadn't even asked the question yet. The next afternoon, we found the door. It was in the back hallway, behind a leaning shelf we'd moved out to the porch. A flat wooden panel, no knob, sealed tight with old yellow caulk. Thick stuff, smeared around the edges like someone really, really wanted it shut. We stood there in silence. Then Eric cracked a joke, I don't remember what, but his hands were shaking. He started peeling at the sealant with a box cutter, while I stood back. Under the caulk was plain wood, no gaps, just dry, dark grain. We poked at it for a while, but the thing was solid. Eventually, we gave up, decided to come back in the morning with flashlights and better tools. That night, I had a dream that didn't feel like a dream. I was back in the kitchen, standing in front of the drawers, pulling them open again and again. Still empty. Always empty. But this time I couldn't breathe. My chest heaving, throat clenching, like something invisible had its hands around me. I ran. Didn't know where, just needed to move. When I woke up in the truck, I was already half sitting, heart racing, sweat pouring down my neck. The next morning we went back in. That hidden door opened into a staircase. Not rickety wood like we expected, but clean concrete steps, steep, narrow, dropping into a basement that didn't belong in a farmhouse. The walls were smooth and cold, too perfect for something this old. It felt built for something. At the bottom, the floor was just packed earth, dry, flat. Against the far wall were shelves, no, inset grooves, each holding a mason jar. There were at least 2 dozen, most were empty. One wasn't. That jar held something dark. Not liquid, more like a clump. Hair maybe, or fabric, or something in between. I leaned closer, but I couldn't touch it. The flashlight shook in my hand. Then the smell hit. Not rot, not mold. It was sharp, metallic, with a strange sweetness that made my tongue curl. It smelled like pressure. That's the only word I can think of. Like the air itself was pushing me out. Eric whispered, "These weren't here yesterday." He sounded more confused than scared, but his voice had dropped low, almost reverent. Then our phones died. Same moment. Both screens went black. A second later, we heard it. Scraping. Something dragging against the wall behind the jars. Slow. Deliberate. Like it knew we were listening. We didn't wait. Ran up the stairs, two at a time, stumbled outside into thick daylight. Everything looked dimmer than it should have. Like the sun couldn't quite reach us. We didn't talk much after that. Just loaded what we could into the truck. Anything to keep our hands busy. But it wasn't just the basement anymore. Upstairs was changing too. The drawers I'd closed? Open again. All of them. The chair, now turned completely, back to the hallway like someone had been sitting there watching. I didn't touch it, just kept packing. The bedroom was the final straw. The mattress had been messy all along, rumpled sheets, pillow half off the frame. But this time, it was perfectly made, corners tight, like in a hotel. We hadn't gone near it. I backed out. Eric caught my eye. Neither of us said a word. That night, just past 3, my phone buzzed. No number, just a photo. The bedroom. Same bed, same room. But now the sheets were messy again, just like before. I hadn't taken the picture. Neither had Eric. Then he called. He got the same image, same timestamp. We hadn't even taken our phones inside the house. We both said we were done. Eric went back once, a week later, for an appraisal he couldn't cancel. He texted me early that morning, said the basement door was sealed again. New caulk, smooth as stone, no fingerprints, no residue, like it had never been opened. He left before the appraiser arrived. I haven't stepped foot near that place since.
I can't believe we don't have a fork.
I was wedged halfway inside the drum of a busted dryer behind my Uncle Donnie's trailer. I was hunting for a stubborn sock that had slipped into the lint trap. My arms were coated in a film of dust and lint, the kind that clings like cobwebs. I was pretending to care more about the sock than I really did when he popped his head around the corner. He asked, like he was offering lemonade, "Want to make a little money?" I raised an eyebrow. I figured he meant the usual grunt work, scrapping old appliances, wrestling with the septic tank again. But instead of handing me a tool, he gave me a crumpled napkin with coordinates scribbled in shorthand. "Out near Black Hollow," he said. "Old house needs clearing." Black Hollow. It sounded like something out of a ghost story, not anywhere I'd ever gone with him, despite tagging along on every adventure. He added, matter of fact, that there wasn't a proper road sign. No address, just a pair of tire ruts swallowed by weeds leading to a clearing. The man who owned it had bought it cheap for hunting. He didn't want the junk inside. It had probably been sitting untouched for years, maybe decades. The way Donnie looked when he said he'd been there once, long ago, told me more than his words did. He wouldn't go back. I didn't know why, but I knew that look. I asked what kind of junk we were talking about. "You'll know it when you see it," he said, "and I'd get $200 if I cleared it out in a day." 200 lousy bucks, but it felt like a dare, and that was enough. The next morning, I borrowed his old truck, a dented Ford, heater working only half the time. I pointed it toward Black Hollow, wherever that was. Past the second turn off Route 27, my phone chirped, "No service." From there, it was nothing but gravel under the tires, trees scratching at the windows like fingernails, and silence so deep I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in the cab. When the trees finally thinned, the house appeared in the clearing. So sudden I nearly drove past it. It sat low in a shallow dip, ringed by hills, the kind of place the world forgets. It was bigger than I expected, 2 stories. A porch that sagged like it had sighed itself into ruin. Pale green siding peeling to gray. A single shutter hung crooked, like it had tried to walk away. The front door leaned off its hinges, kicked in, and never fixed. I shut off the engine. The silence felt thick, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I climbed out and tried not to let it fill my lungs. The air wasn't fresh, it wasn't rotten, it was just still. I nudged the door with my boot and stepped inside. The whole house seemed to tilt, like I'd woken it from a long nap. My boots made tiny pops on the floorboards. The only sounds were my breathing and the smallest squeaks beneath me. Inside, there wasn't much left. In the kitchen, a splintered table sat under a dust-covered window. 2 chairs lay toppled, backs broken. The wood stove in the corner held ash that looked cooled only days ago, though that made no sense. Whoever left had left in haste, or never meant to come back. I climbed the stairs. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms. One had a narrow cot with nothing on it but a stained mattress. Another was just peeling wallpaper and an empty wardrobe standing guard. The third looked like a child's room. A toy truck half buried beneath crumbling books. No clothes, no photographs, no signs of living, just a tableau, frozen in dust. I started in the back room. Dressers, busted and rotting, crumbled under my hands. I dragged them out to the truck. I filled trash bags with rusted tin cans, a pair of boots molded into lumps, newspapers yellowed to near illegibility. By mid-afternoon, I was hauling warped picture frames, glass cracked, empty when I heard the front door creak open. I spun around, heart pounding against my spine like it wanted out. But the door leaned exactly where I'd left it. No breeze, no one. I told myself out loud, old houses settle, hinges groan, wood contracts. It didn't help. Back upstairs, I pulled a few more bags of cracked plates, bent spoons, and a chipped figurine. I'd saved the attic for last, mostly because I'd hoped it didn't exist. But there it was, a hatch in the ceiling, slightly ajar. I froze. Had it been open when I arrived? Light spilled through the dust, motes drifting like silver thread. The air was warmer, drier, like it came from somewhere else. I climbed the ladder. The attic was empty, bare rafters, old wood. But it didn't feel empty. Shadows clung to the corners. They did not move. In the far corner sat a single red child's shoe, upright, laces tied, no dust, no wear, as if it had been cleaned, or was waiting. I didn't touch it. One hand on the ladder, one on the rung. I backed down and slid the hatch shut. My breathing thundered in my ears. I turned to finish the last room, bundling a scratchy blanket into a trash bag. Then, I heard footsteps above me. Light, precise, heel to toe, no creaks, just weight shifting. I froze. The footsteps traced across the attic floor, then stopped. The hatch stayed shut. Then came humming, a child's tune, soft, off-key, like someone trying to remember the words. Something snapped in me. I walked straight down the stairs without looking back. My heart was hammering, threatening to break through my ribs. I didn't close the door. I didn't bolt it. I just left. I climbed into the truck, slammed the door, and sat there listening to my ragged breathing and the whisper of the woods. Then I started the engine and tore out of that clearing like fire was chasing me. The cold air whipped in through the windows, but it didn't scrub the feeling from my skin. It stayed inside, lodged behind my ribs. That night, I dreamt, or maybe it was something else. The house was whole again. Morning light stretched across the porch. A woman stirred a pot on the stove. A man sat at the table. A child crouched in the hallway, drawing on the floor with black crayon. When I leaned closer, I saw it. The child was drawing the house, and inside its walls, in thick black scribbles, were shapes. People, pressed tight, trapped behind the wood. I woke before the child turned around. The next morning, I returned the truck to Donnie. He didn't ask how it went. He just took the keys and looked at me. Maybe that look said more than words. He shrugged and said, "Told him you wouldn't finish. No one does." I didn't ask who else had tried. I didn't want to know. Since then, I've never gone back to those hills. I was 33 years old when I decided to disappear for a while. No grand plan, just a hike somewhere far enough to lose Wi-Fi, lose connection, maybe even lose my own thoughts for a few hours. I didn't tell anyone. Not my roommate, not my mom, not even my cat, Mr. Fuzz. I drove until I was surrounded by pines and hickory, somewhere deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Not too far from Boone, or Boonish. By the time my phone died and I parked on a gravel shoulder, I had no idea where I was, and I didn't care. The trail was one of those well-worn kinds, with signs and arrow markers. Safe, predictable, bland. After about an hour, I spotted something else. A sliver of a path, narrower than deer might allow. Maybe an old road, maybe just years of footsteps where so few people went. There's something about a hidden path that feels full of possibility, even if that possibility is just being absolutely lost. So I followed it, because lost sounded better than bored. I must have walked a little over a mile before stumbling onto something. An old farmhouse, hidden behind branches and shadows. No driveway, no mailbox, nothing that said it still existed beyond its sagging frame. Windows uneven and dark, like broken, blinking eyes. A porch leaning to one side, its boards curled like slices of cheese left too long in the sundae. The whole thing looked held together by time and grudging persistence. And there, nailed to the porch railing, was an envelope. My name, just Celine, scrawled in big, black letters. Like someone meant it to be seen. I froze mid-step. I didn't know what to expect. Maybe a note telling me to leave. Maybe a prank by some trailside artist. But there's a gut punch in seeing your name in a place no one should know to call it. Adrenaline fluttered in my chest, but I couldn't move. I looked behind me, no trail, no footprints, no reason for my name to be there. I swallowed hard. The forest was quiet, too quiet to be natural. I didn't touch the envelope. Instead, I pushed the screen door open just wide enough to slip through. It swung inward like it had been waiting for a hesitant guest. Inside, the air was cold. Not mountain cold, but the kind of cold where warmth felt like a rumor. My skin prickled. The floor shifted beneath my feet, not with creaks, but with a strange, silent give. There was furniture, or what used to be furniture. A couch collapsed inward, as if it had admitted defeat. A fireplace streaked black with some oily residue, but giving off no smell at all. No dust, no mildew, none of the usual decay. Just absence. I moved deeper, eyes adjusting. Still no dust anywhere. Everything deserted, yet preserved. Like a set built for a show, abandoned, but kept spotless. The kitchen chairs were wrong. One faced a corner, another pointed at the pantry, a third shoved halfway inside it, as if someone had been arranging them to avoid something invisible. Chairs are so ordinary, until they aren't. The fridge was open. Inside, a dozen glass jars, identical, empty, sealed tight, perfectly clean. No labels, no residue, just waiting. I knew I should have left, but at the back of the room was a staircase. Narrow, steep, clinging to the wall at a crooked angle, like someone had thrown it there to reach something quickly. Curiosity, that awful trait, kept me from turning back. I placed my hand on the railing. Cold, smooth wood. Then I climbed. The upstairs hall had 4 doors, all on the same side. The first was bare wood, heavy and dark. The second, painted sky blue, chipped around the knob as if painted over a dozen times. The third had a mirror bolted to it. The fourth wasn't a door at all, just a jagged hole, hinges sticking out like broken bones. I chose the mirror door. Maybe I thought it would show me something to laugh off later. Maybe I hoped a reflection would prove it was all just a weird dream. Inside was the cleanest room I'd ever seen. White cotton sheets smoothed perfectly, not a single crease. A little wooden desk near the window. its surface carved with long, jagged symbols. No curves, only sharp angles. They didn't look like anything I could read, but they meant something. On the desk, a plain shoebox. The worst part was that I wanted to leave it closed. I stood there, breathing fast. Then I opened it. Inside were photographs of me. A stack of them, all recent. Me asleep, me brushing my teeth, me sitting in traffic, me crying on my apartment floor, me in the shower, shot through my bathroom window. I flipped through with shaking fingers until I reached the last one. It was me, standing on the porch of this exact house. The letter, the railing, everything. The angle was clear. The timestamp in my mind screamed, "Minutes ago." I snapped. I ran. Down the stairs, out the door, into the woods. Away from that cursed silence in those cold porcelain chairs. I didn't glance back, didn't slow down. I hit the trail again, tripped over roots, scraped my hands on bark but didn't stop. Each breath felt like it wanted to give up. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my skull. Branches slapped at me as I barreled forward. Eventually I reached a dirt road. I found a ranger station further down, walked in like a zombie. They asked if I was okay. I nodded, charged my phone, and drove home without turning on the radio. I didn't tell them, or anyone, what I'd seen. That night, I didn't sleep in my bedroom. I dragged a blanket to the living room, left every light on, and sat beside the television. I hoped I'd wake up and realize it was a dream. But when I woke, I was just as terrified. The next morning, something knocked. Not on the front door, on the front window. I froze, breath held. Then finally, I got up and opened the door. On the doorstep was an envelope. Same handwriting, my name again. This time it wasn't sealed. I slid it open with shaking fingers. Inside was a single Polaroid. Me, asleep in my bed just as I'd been the night before. But in the mirror above my headboard was the reflection of a man holding a camera. I dropped the photo, scrambled back. My heart lodged in my throat. That day, I packed everything. I moved the next morning. The farmhouse sat way out past the edge of Kingslow, tucked behind a tangle of half-forgotten roads that barely show up on GPS anymore. People still call it the Weatherby place, even though nobody's lived there in a long time. I don't know how far back the history goes, but when I moved here 6 years ago, it was already abandoned and half swallowed by trees. From what people say, the last man to live there was Emery Weatherby. He was a retired machinist. Lived alone after his wife passed. Real quiet, kept to himself. He died out in the barn one winter, just dropped dead while feeding the animals. They didn't find him until weeks later. By then, the cows had busted down part of the fence and wandered off into the hills, and the house had already started to fall apart. After that, no one touched the place. Not the bank, not the county. It just sat there. People say the land's cursed, but I think it's more that folks in this town have a long memory and a short interest in other people's problems. Honestly, I didn't think about it at all until a coworker, Todd, mentioned something strange. We were locking up after a shift, just the two of us standing in the back lot. He said he saw a light in the upstairs window of the Weatherby place. He said it like a joke, smirking while he spoke. You ever drive past that old wreck up on Ridgeline? Saw a lantern light in the top window last night. Swear to God. I laughed along with him, but I watched his face. Something about how quickly he moved on told me he wasn't totally joking. Later that night, I couldn't shake it. It wasn't the idea of a ghost. It was the thought that someone might be out there, living in that place. Maybe someone who didn't want to be seen. So, that weekend, on a Saturday afternoon, I took the turn off Ridgeline and followed the overgrown road. The closer I got, the more I started to question what I was doing. The gravel drive was mostly weeds by then, tall and thick, the kind that whip at your legs and stick to your socks. I left my car at the bottom of the slope, near the ditch, just in case I needed to back out fast. Walking up, the place looked less collapsed than I expected. The roof sagged, but it was still intact. The porch boards were warped, but they held my weight, and the front steps were covered in mud, fresh mud, footprints all over them, not animal tracks. They were too wide, too uneven, like someone had limped or dragged a foot. I froze there, staring at the pattern. Then, before I could overthink it, I stepped up and pushed the front door. It opened easily. No resistance, no stickiness, just swung open, like it had been used yesterday. The first thing I noticed was the silence. The second thing was how empty it was. I expected mess, maybe old furniture or junk left behind. But no, the place was scrubbed clean. Not literally scrubbed, it was dusty, but there wasn't a single object left. No photos, no dishes, no clothes, not even wires sticking out of the walls where fixtures used to be. Just empty sockets and empty rooms. But the floor, the dust was thin and even, except where it had been worn down. There were paths through it, wide, trodden paths that led from room to room, like someone had paced them over and over. I followed them. The kitchen cabinets hung open. No shelves inside, just hollow boxes. The pantry door was off its hinges, leaning against the wall. The living room had one thing in it, a sofa. It was sunken and stained, but clearly too heavy to move. Looked like it had been there since the 70s. The corners of the room were strangely clean. No cobwebs, no insects. It didn't feel abandoned. It felt like someone had been maintaining it, quietly, obsessively. Upstairs, it got worse. The hallway was narrow, long, and slightly tilted. The wallpaper bubbled and peeled where water had seeped in. The first bedroom was empty. No rods, no curtains, just yellowing paper and warped boards. The second was almost the same, except this one had more footprints, dozens of them, crisscrossing, looping, as if someone had walked every direction before turning back. I stepped into the third bedroom and stopped. There was a chair. Just one. It sat against the far window, facing the doorway. Newer than anything else in the house. Not brand new, but taken care of. Solid wood, tall back, no dust. And the floor beneath it was scraped. Deep drag marks leading across the room, like someone had been sliding it from wall to wall, trying to find the perfect spot. The seat was clean, freshly wiped. I stood there longer than I should have. My first thought was kids. Maybe they broke in and dared each other to sit in the ghost chair. Or maybe a hunter used the room as a hideout. But the silence around that chair, it wasn't just quiet, it felt loaded, like everything was holding its breath. Then I heard it, a small soft squeak, like a hinge turning. Back down the hall. I hadn't touched any doors. I turned slowly, heartbeat pounding in my ears. One of the closet doors was ajar. I stepped toward it, my hands sweating as I reached out. Inside was a narrow closet, bare walls, and a chair. Same as the other. This one faced the wall. Clean, fresh drag marks on the floor. I stared, trying to make sense of it. Then came the scrape, from behind me. Long, slow, deliberate. I didn't turn. I didn't want to know. I backed out of the closet, eyes on the floor, my hands shaking. Then I heard it again. The sound of wood against floorboards, slow and steady. The first chair was moving, not knocked over, not bumped, moved, like someone invisible was sliding it into place. I turned. It had shifted, just a few inches. Enough. It was angled differently now, toward the door, toward me. I backed into the hallway, every step stiff and careful. My phone was in my pocket, but I didn't dare look down. Just kept a hand on it like it was a lifeline. I walked toward the stairs, the air behind me heavy, pressing me forward. By the time I reached the bottom step, I wasn't thinking. I was just moving. I hit the front door and didn't stop, shoved it open, fell into the yard. The weeds clawed at my legs as I stumbled toward the car, dropped my keys, swore, picked them up with shaking hands. Got the door open, slammed it behind me. The engine turned, then turned again. Wouldn't catch. Then it did. I backed out without looking. Didn't care if I hit something. I didn't look back until I was halfway down the road. Just a glance in the rear view. The upstairs window was dark, but the chair was still there. Only now it was pressed closer to the glass. Turned toward the yard, toward the road, toward me. I didn't tell Todd what I saw. Didn't tell anyone. I haven't been back. Won't even take that road anymore. The road up to the house wasn't on any GPS. We followed a pin Caleb had dropped before we lost signal. By the time we turned off the paved highway and onto the dirt trail winding through the trees, our phones were already useless. No service, no maps, no calls. Just us, a dusty path, and the sound of gravel cracking under the tires. It felt like we'd crossed an invisible line, one that separated the present from a place that didn't really want to be found. Caleb had inherited the farmhouse from an uncle he barely remembered. Some older guy from his dad's side, lived reclusive up in the hills, never married, no kids. The kind of relative you don't talk about until they die and leave you something strange. The man had passed months earlier, but with how long the house had been sitting untouched, it might as well have been years. The will named Caleb as the only heir, and now here we were. He'd asked me to come along mostly for company, maybe to help size the place up. The idea was to figure out if it could be salvaged, fixed, sold, in something. We'll just walk through, he'd said. Take some notes, snap a few pictures. Easy. Yeah, easy. When the house finally came into view, I slowed down without even meaning to. The land around it was bloated, overgrown with weeds that reached almost waist high. The house leaned slightly to one side, like it was tired of holding itself together. The porch sagged. The windows were cloudy and gray, as if rubbed down with ashes. But it wasn't totally destroyed. No holes in the roof, no busted doors. Structurally, it still stood, yet it carried a stillness that felt personal, like it had been left in the middle of a sentence. Inside, it didn't smell as bad as I expected, just musty and thick, like air that hadn't moved in years. I half expected droppings or squatters, but everything was intact. Not clean, but preserved. A coat still hung by the door, heavy wool, faded. Plates were stacked in the sink. There was dust, sure, but not decay. Beds upstairs were still made, quilts tucked tight. Shoes sat by the back door. Even a calendar on the wall in the kitchen, stuck on July 1978. "This is wild," Caleb muttered, running a hand across the counter. "It's like he froze time on purpose. Or like he just walked out mid-step," I said. He didn't reply. He looked around, then said he wanted to check the barn. I nodded and told him I'd look upstairs. The stairs were narrow and loud, every step creaking like it wanted to be heard. At the top, I saw 3 doors. That stopped me, because Caleb had said there were only 2 bedrooms. I remembered exactly, because he joked about flipping a coin to see who got the bigger one. First door, a small bedroom, narrow bed, a wooden chair in the corner, uncomfortable on purpose, a cracked mirror on the dresser, a rug with a faded looping pattern. Second door, the master. Bigger room, older furniture, wallpaper peeled in strips near the ceiling, but the bed was still made. Quilt tucked tight, like it had just been used. Then I opened the third, smaller, no windows. The walls seemed to press in. A crib stood against the far side, its paint chipped to raw wood. The floor was scattered with children's clothes. Little shoes, tiny shirts, a toy horse with no wheels. The kind of mess your brain can't place brand new or decades old. I stepped inside just for a moment and felt compressed, like the air itself pushed back. I didn't stay long. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I turned to look back, maybe to reassure myself I hadn't imagined it. But from the landing, I saw only 2 doors. That stopped me cold. I squinted up, counted again. 1, 2, no third. When Caleb came back, I asked him how many rooms were upstairs. He said, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Why? I told him what I saw. The third door, the crib, the mess. He tilted his head, skeptical. Maybe you counted the bathroom. He laughed. I know what a bathroom looks like, I said. This was a room, no window, a crib inside. It felt wrong. He looked up the stairs, then back at me. I'll go look. I waited. He came down a few minutes later, pale, and said there were just 2 doors. Nothing else. Nothing strange. We didn't argue. But I noticed he didn't joke again. The rest of the day we worked, swept the front room, took furniture outside, snapped photos. Little things began to happen. I set down a hammer on the table. Later it was on the couch. A broom fell on its own, then stood balanced on its bristles for 4 long seconds before tipping over. Caleb lost his tape measure twice. It turned up once on the top shelf of the pantry, then on the fridge. We didn't talk about it, just exchanged glances that said, "Did you see that too?" When night came, we climbed into our trucks to sleep. No one suggested staying in the house. No one needed to. The next morning, Caleb left for town. I stayed behind, broom in hand, determined to clean. That's when I heard footsteps upstairs. Not creaks, not settling wood, real footsteps. Heavy, slow, measured. Someone walking in the master bedroom. I froze, stared at the ceiling like I could see through it. It wasn't wind. It wasn't an animal. I climbed the stairs slowly. At the landing, 2 doors. I opened the first, the small room. Same mirror, same rug. Then the second, the master. Nothing had moved. Quilt still perfect. But the air felt wrong, still and thick, like the moment before a storm. Then, right in the center of the room, footsteps started again. This time, they were with me. I turned, heart hammering, and backed out. Slammed the door. The steps continued on the other side. Slow, deliberate, then silence. I didn't go back. When I told Caleb, he laughed, but wouldn't meet my eyes. Just stared out the window for a long time. That night, we slept in our trucks again. No discussion, just unspoken agreement. On the 3rd day, Caleb said he wanted to check upstairs one more time before heading to the barn. I stayed near the front door. I heard his boots on the stairs, then nothing. When he came down, his face was white. In his hand, a small child's shoe, brown leather, scuffed, soft with age. "I swear that wasn't there yesterday," he whispered. He dropped it on the counter and said nothing more. We left soon after. On the drive down the mountain, I glanced back once. The house leaned in the distance, waiting. And in the master bedroom window, I saw it. A 3rd door, wide open, inside the room. Black and empty, like a mouth waiting to speak. I never went back. Caleb did, weeks later, with a contractor. That night he texted me. Guy wouldn't even go in. The man stood on the porch, looked at the house, shook his head, and said, "Some places you leave the way they are." That was it. Caleb never brought it up again. The last time I drove near that ridge, the house was still there. Same lean, same slouch, same silence. The county had me survey an old farmhouse out past Dry Creek, one of those forgotten spots tucked into a fold of the hills, where the roads are more memory than pavement and the mail hasn't run in decades. Places like that don't show up on maps anymore, but the paperwork still exists. Sometimes, when a property technically still belongs to someone, or to no one, it ends up in front of someone like me. Lucky winner. I didn't volunteer. No one ever does for these inspections. But when your name comes up in the rotation, that's that. You get the file, the address scribbled in the margins, and maybe a couple of grainy black and white photos from the last time someone thought to document it. That could have been 10 years ago, or 30. This one had a single image stapled to the folder. The house already looked like it was dying back then. I packed the truck, grabbed the camera, clipboard, flashlight, standard stuff, and headed out early. It was late September, I think. The trees had started to drop their leaves, and the air carried that dry, hollow feeling that sneaks in before the cold sets in for real. The drive took nearly 2 hours. The GPS quit about 15 miles out, and I had to rely on old directions that referred to landmarks like Mason's Shed and the split tree at mile 3. Eventually, the road narrowed to gravel, then to a trail wide enough for only one vehicle. Branches scraped along the sides of my truck. At the end, I found a rusted gate, so overgrown it looked like part of the woods. A sign still clung to a loop of chain. Private property, no trespassing. The lettering was nearly gone, but someone had meant it once. The driveway beyond was choked with tall grass and thick brush. No way I was driving through, so I parked at the gate, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked. The path curved up as I went, and the house came into view slowly, like it was waiting. It sat on a rise, the kind that would have once given it a good view of the valley, but it looked tired, worn to the bone. The porch leaned forward, collapsing under its own weight. Shingles were missing in strips, siding warped and falling in sections. The windows were either smashed or covered with boards, and the front door, if you could call it that, hung on by one rusted hinge. There was no sign of life. But the house didn't feel empty. Not haunted, not dramatic, just not empty. Like someone had been there, or still was. I stepped onto the porch, careful not to put too much weight on one board. The whole thing groaned. Inside, it was dark, thick. I clicked on my flashlight. The beam cut through floating dust. First thing that hit me was the smell. Mold, mildew, and something else like wet drywall and animal fur left to rot. I've been in plenty of places like that. You learn to breathe through your mouth. Then I saw them, boot prints, stamped clean into the dust right in front of me, starting at the door, leading deeper inside. Not smudges, not partial tracks, full, solid prints. Clear enough to see the tread. And they weren't mine. Bigger than my boots, wider too, fresh. That dust layer had to be at least a year thick, maybe more, and these prints cut through like they'd been made that morning. My first thought was squatter, maybe more than one. Abandoned houses get used for shelter. I've seen it before. But this felt different. The tracks weren't rushed or erratic. They were deliberate. One after the other, right down the center of the floorboards. I followed them into the parlor. The wallpaper hung in strips, curling at the edges as if trying to peel itself off. The fireplace had half collapsed, bricks scattered across the floor. But the prints didn't pause. They moved clean through, straight into the kitchen. That's where things shifted. The prints circled. Once, twice, 3 times around the center of the room, like someone pacing in tight loops. Then, they stopped at the basement door. It was shut, but the knob turned easily. No resistance. I opened it a few inches and pointed my light into the gap. The stairs were gone. Not completely, but rotted into jagged splinters. A few boards clung to the wall, the rest collapsed. Nothing you could walk on. Yet the boot prints led right to the edge, stopping at the first missing step. And then, nothing. Just empty black below. Silence, thick and stale. I stood listening, and the thought came. Someone had walked into that void. Like the stair was still there. Or like they hadn't needed one. Protocol said I had to document the basement. The front stairs were unsafe, so I circled to the back. The cellar doors were half buried in vines. It took 5 minutes just to clear a grip. There was a padlock, or what was left of one. Snapped clean through. Not rusted, not corroded, twisted like it had been wrenched apart. I pulled the doors open. They groaned, the sound echoing into the ground. I swept the beam inside. The basement was larger than expected. Low ceiling, stone walls, dirt floor. The air was cold and still. I took one step down. Something moved. Fast, low to the ground. Just a flicker at the edge of the beam, sliding into the shadows. I froze. No footsteps. No sound. Nothing. I swept the light carefully. More boot prints. Deep ones. Starting at the base of the stairs, heading toward the back. Beside them were smudges, drag marks, like something had been pulled or crawled. In the corner was a mound of dirt, rough, uneven, like someone had been digging and tried to cover it again. The earth was darker, fresher. I kept the light on it as I stepped closer, and then it shifted, just slightly. Like the ground exhaled, my flashlight flickered, enough to make me step back. The shadow in that corner wasn't behaving right. It didn't scatter when the light hit, it absorbed it. No matter where I aimed, it stayed thick, unmoving like frozen smoke. Then came the sound. At first faint, like breathing bouncing off the walls. But then it returned, a slow, steady scraping, fingers dragging through loose soil, not frantic, not rushed, just persistent. From beneath that mound, I didn't wait. I backed up fast, nearly tripped over the steps, scrambled out, slammed the cellar doors, and looped the chain. My hands shook so badly I fumbled twice before I caught it. Back inside, I retraced my steps through the kitchen and stopped. The prints were gone. Every one. Mine, the others, all of it. The floor smooth again, coated in thick dust like no one had been there in years. I didn't finish the report. I scrawled unsalvageable across the form, folded it, stuffed it in my bag. Then I walked straight out, down the overgrown drive, never looking back. The GPS had already stopped making sense a couple hours earlier. Not that we were relying on it that much to begin with. My cousin Milo and I thought we could piece together an old trail through the Appalachians. We had scraps from old hiking forums that hadn't been updated in years, blurry images from guidebooks scanned in the early 2002, and whatever shaky phone signal we caught when we popped above the tree line. The plan, if you could call it that, was simple. Hike out to a creek someone mentioned on a message board, camp overnight, maybe fish if we were lucky, head back the next morning. We weren't survivalists, but we'd done a few weekend hikes. We figured we could handle one more. When the trail started fading under our feet and the sun slipped behind the ridges, we didn't panic. Not right away, it just felt like another screw-up. We'd take a break, get our bearings, maybe laugh about it later. We thought we had time. Then we found the house. It was almost dark when it appeared at the edge of a clearing. The clearing didn't look like it belonged to the forest anymore. Like something had carved it out long ago, and nature hadn't figured out how to take it back. The trees pressed in on all sides, just out of reach, like they were too polite or too scared to come closer. The house was still standing. The porch sagged, but it hadn't collapsed. The roof leaned at odd angles, yet the red brick chimney stood intact. No broken windows, no boards over the doors. No signs of squatters or animals. It looked untouched, preserved. Looks abandoned, Milo said, already heading up the steps. I told him not to go in, twice. Not because I had some bad feeling. I just didn't like the look of it. It was too quiet. No wind, no bugs, no rustling leaves. Just that thick stillness, like the clearing itself was holding its breath. But Milo being Milo, he didn't hesitate. He walked onto the porch like it was some roadside attraction. And I followed because standing out there alone felt worse. The front door hung slightly open, no knob, no lock, just dangling on rusted hinges. It swung inward with a soft creak when Milo pushed it. We stepped inside like it was nothing. Immediately, it felt wrong. Not in a horror movie way. Nothing jumped out, no creaking boards or flickering lights. It was just thick, like the air itself didn't want us there. My ears popped, like I'd changed elevation. For a moment I felt dizzy, like stepping into a memory I didn't know I had. The living room was covered in white sheets. Furniture, maybe a piano, a low bookshelf, all hidden, like someone tried to erase the room without removing anything. The sheets had dust, but not much, not disturbed. To the left, a narrow hallway sank into darkness. To the right, a staircase clung to the wall. The boards groaned just from us looking at them. We decided to stay. It was dumb. But the cold was setting in fast. We were tired. There wasn't anywhere else to go without risking more mistakes. So we laid our bags in the living room, kept our flashlights on, and split granola bars. We tried not to look at the hallway too much. I couldn't sleep. The silence was unbearable. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought I heard something faint. Breathing. Footsteps. But when I sat up, there was nothing. No movement. No sounds outside either. Not even wind. Just the house. Solid. Patient. At some point, I must have drifted off. The next thing I knew, I was freezing. My sleeping bag had come undone. Not unzipped, just open, like I'd climbed out without remembering. The flashlight was off, even though I'd left it on beside me. Everything felt wrong. Milo was gone. I sat up. His bag was crumpled and empty. His boots were missing. The stillness pressed down hard on my chest. I didn't call out. Instinct told me not to. Like speaking would make things worse. Barefoot, flashlight in hand, I walked into the hallway. The boards were cold under my feet. The kitchen was at the back of the house. I checked it first. Everything was shut. Drawers, cabinets, not dusty, not clean either. A single fly banged against the window over and over. Tiny thuds in the silence, the only thing moving. I turned, looked at the staircase. Every part of me said not to go up, but I did, slowly. Each step pressed like it might collapse. They creaked, but not loudly, almost as if they didn't want to be heard. At the top was a hallway, 3 doors. The air smelled stale, not rotten, just old. Like the breath of someone who'd slept too long. The first door opened easily. Empty room, dust, floorboards, 1 broken chair in the corner. The second door was sealed. Not locked, just unmoving. I didn't force it. The third opened before I reached it. It jerked open with a sound like metal tearing. I jumped back, but nothing came out. Just silence. Inside, Milo stood by the window. Still, he was barefoot. His socks were soaked. The floor glistened, like it had rained in that one spot. He didn't turn. I whispered his name. Nothing. He just stared out, like watching something I couldn't see. Hands limp at his sides. Shoulders rigid but not tense, like he'd been paused. I stepped in, heart hammering so hard I felt it in my teeth. The moment I crossed the threshold, the door slammed behind me. Hard. I froze. Neither of us moved. Then he turned. Slow. Unnatural. His neck moved first, then his body, piece by piece. Like remembering how his face was blank. Not scared. Not confused, just empty, like he wasn't fully awake. He whispered something. I couldn't catch it. A name maybe, or a word, but it slipped away the second he said it, like it wasn't meant for me. I grabbed his arm. It was cold, damp. He didn't resist, didn't speak again. He just followed me out, step by step, pausing on the stairs to look back. Back at the room, back at the window. When we reached the living room, he sat down on the floor, cross-legged, silent, staring. I shoved everything into my pack. My hands shook so bad I dropped the flashlight twice. I didn't ask questions, didn't wait. I got him up, slung his arm over my shoulder, and walked us out into the dark. We went downhill, no trail, no direction. Just down, hoping gravity would lead us out. It took hours. By noon we found a road. I don't remember hearing cars, just the slap of asphalt underfoot. A truck driver pulled over. He stared like we were ghosts. Maybe we looked like them. He gave us water, asked if we were okay. I think I nodded. Milo said nothing. His socks were still wet. 3 weeks later, I went back. My dad came with me. I didn't tell him everything, just that we'd found an old house. I wanted to prove it was real. The clearing was there, same shape, same hill, same outline, but no house. Not even rubble. No chimney, no boards, nothing. Just grass, waist high, untouched, like nothing had ever been there. Milo doesn't talk about it at all. His parents told me he's been sleepwalking. They find him standing at the window some nights, still, barefoot, socks soaking wet, even in July. So, yeah, I'm not going back.